This video documents an item I recently purchased, bought it on Amazon. It's the Acu-Rite brand home environment display. It's basically sort of a low-end weather station type product that has a 4-zone temperature and humidity readout on a central base unit using the base unit plus 3 remote wireless sensors. It's Acu-Rite's model 06036 MAI. The main component is the base unit, which is a sort of a iPad looking wall mount or desktop unit. It has a snap out stand which allows it to sit on a desk like that, or you can hang it on the wall using 2 places for screws or nails. It does take batteries as a backup, as it is at pains to point out the batteries are for backup power only and to retain records in case of a power outage. It is not intended to be run off the batteries, that's just for backup. And not shown here, but included with the package is a wall wart that can plug into the AC wall power, and with a fairly long cable it plugs in the side here. Right angle plug that allows it to come down more or less inconspicuously on the back of the unit, either wall hung or on a desktop. The base unit it has a sort of a bell button for control of some sort of tone alarm, up and down buttons and a set button. These are for menu control and parameter adjustment, and a settings button. And then there are 4 buttons that are color coded next to each of the zones: the blue zone, yellow zone, green zone, and sort of a dark aqua green zone. And then there's a central area for its weather prediction, or maybe more of a weather status based on other parameters. And then this uncolored area here is a time and date readout. The dimensions of the product are a little bit unclear. Acu-Rite's website and responses on Amazon to potential customer questions or questions from potential customers say a slightly different dimension, and some of the users have reported a slightly different dimension. I read this as 8 3/16 inches wide. It's been variously reported between 8 inches exactly and 8.5 inches. I'm not reading any place on this that's different than 8 3/16 inch wide. It's slightly bowed at the top, but I'm reading the overall height of this unit to be 5 9/16 inch tall, so really just a hair more than 5.5 inches. The thickness is almost exactly 1 inch, just a hair less, maybe a 1/16 of an inch less than 1 inch. It's a backlit color LCD. It'll look a lot prettier once it gets powered up. Let's look at the rest of it. The package or kit also includes 3 sensors. They're temperature and humidity sensors. They're all wireless. Individually, they're model 06002M. Here's one of the confusing features of this. The instructions say it's model 06036 or 06024, while the box says 06036 MAI. I'm presuming the MAI is the suffix that's attached to indicate that it's the kit, including the base unit and the temperature transmitters. But they have separate manuals, and the part numbers can be a little confusing depending where you're looking. Anyway, so the base unit, to confirm, is 06036 MAI, and the transmitters are 06002M. This is the temperature and humidity sensor. Start off with the dimensions of the unit. I measure it at a total of 5 1/16 inch from bottom to tip, and 1 9/16 inch wide, just a hair over 1.5 inches, and about exactly 1 inch thick at the thickest part. This is a sensor for measuring temperature and humidity. It is intended for use indoors and outdoors, although the instructions are clear to point out that it isn't weatherproof. It can be used outdoors, but it is not supposed to be in the sunlight, and it is not supposed to be rained on, although it has limited capabilities. At one hand, they suggest that you can hang it from a piece of fishing wire on a branch of a tree, which suggests that it can tolerate some rain and or snow, but yet another part of their documentation suggests that it's not that great idea to really leave it be out in the elements, so go figure. I'll talk about that later. I have had in the past some similar units by Honeywell and other companies that I thought were a little better in this regard. They would have gasketed covers with O-rings or rubber seals. The way the cover detaches, it'll deflect most of the water coming in, much the way the trunk of a car does, without actually being sealed. So most rain that might come in here will be deflected around the opening and not flow into it. But it's still, you know, a lashing rain or something might get inside. Presumably the humidistat sensor part of it is reasonably water resistant, or at least intended to work with water in there if it gets rained on. The transmitters each take 2 AA cells, whereas the base unit takes 3 AAA cells. The instructions recommend alkaline batteries in one place, but other sources, including the website of Acu-Rite, suggest that lithium batteries are fine, so I would always use a lithium battery in a place like this just because it's a pain to go around and change alkaline batteries. The lithiums are, I think, a better choice for this. So I have my AAA Energizer Ultimate Lithiums here in AAA size, and a set of the same thing in a AA size. Alright, all the units have their batteries now, and I should point out that there is a clear and a reset button hidden behind the battery compartment door. And there are instructions on the back of the battery compartment door indicating how to access monitor options, edit alarms, swap windows, and so on, without having to pull the paper manual out. And you can see that the activity LEDs on these transmitters are occasionally flashing. I guess that indicates that they're alive, and it may also indicate when they are sending out their radio data burst to the base unit. Some models I've had that are similar to this, or the base unit sends out a request for data, and then each transmitter responds when polled. Other models I've had simply send out the data every so often, and the base unit receives it without being polled. I'm not really sure how it works with this. On the base unit, each of the 4 zones can be named, which is a plus that most of the other units like this I've seen and used do not have. They are a fixed number of names, though. You can't just put anything in there. Things like aquarium, animals, attic, barn, basement, bathroom, 3 different bathrooms, 4 different bedrooms, cellar, cooler, dining room, family room, freezer, fridge, garage, garden, guest room, hot tub, humidor, indoor, kitchen, laundry, living room, master bedroom, music room, that's pretty interesting, nursery, office, other, outdoor pool, porch, spa, storage, sump pump, upstairs, utility, and wine. So if you want these things to say something intelligible, you want to review these choices carefully so what it says on the display makes sense and you can remember where those zones really are. Myself, I have interest in knowing what it is inside one place inside my house. I usually put that's going to be from the base unit, because the base unit has its own transmitter in it, or its own sensor. It doesn't require a remote transmitter for the humidity and temperature at the base unit. So then I have 3 other locations. One of them is going to be in my basement workshop, and the other 2 are outside. One of them is going to be on my detached garage, which is unheated. Therefore, on the outside of that should be a pretty accurate indication of outdoor temperature. And then another one will go inside the garage, which is always warmer. I don't really need to know that all that much, and I do have a separate thermometer in there, but this thing comes with 3 transmitters, and I really don't know where I'd put another one. So that's where I'm going to put these, at least initially. You can always relocate these later on and rename them. So the base unit does have readouts for basement, garage, which will be indoor garage temperature, indoor, which is just the inside of my house, and outdoor, which will be the outdoor transmitter on the outside of the garage. For a good measure, I have used a Sharpie pen, actually more bold than it should have been. Garage indoor, garage outdoor, and basement, just to keep track of which one's which while I'm programming them. Here's the wall wart power supply. It's not universal voltage, which surprises me. It's only 120 volt AC input, 60 hertz. It's pretty heavy. I'm thinking this is not a switching power supply. It weighs like an old-fashioned linear power supply with a transformer in there. I suppose it's misleading and might in fact be a switching supply, but that's sort of moot for most people. It's 5 volts output. Apparently it's regulated at 100 milliamps capacity. The cable is 6 feet long and terminates at a small barrel connector, which, as pointed out before, plugs in the side like this, and it can either go back or straight down depending on how you're mounting it. So here's the base unit powered up. You can more clearly see the display, which looks quite nice. It has the 4 zones. One of them is defined as display at the moment. The other one says IDA, whatever that means. There's available and available. It's got the automatic weather display. It's got the time and the date. And now I have to do the programming. Oh, I should also mention the viewing display. I'm looking at it almost straight above here, and it's quite clear it's straight above. As I come down to look at it straight on, except for the glare here, it's still pretty good. But as I get below it, it rapidly diminishes in contrast, and it's very hard to see. It's not intended to be viewed low, so this is important if you're going to mount it on a wall, that you don't mount it any lower than eye level, or wherever you're going to view it from. If you're planning on viewing it from a desk or a kitchen counter or something, for example, make sure you don't mount it higher than eye level at that point, or it'll be a problem. It has a pretty good sideways viewing angle. You can view it at pretty much any reasonable sideways angle. The glare makes it look worse to the naked eye. It's much more legible than it looks in this video. A bit of an overview of each display. At each of the 4 zones, except for this one, which is apparently dedicated to the base unit, you have a signal strength meter from the transmitter, which are all reading quite good now, and they update periodically. I'm not sure why, but they do that. They have the name tag for each location, or the label as they call it. There's a little indicator that's not visible here right now, but it's off in the upper right hand corner or the left hand corner of these. That's supposed to be a style indicator that indicates the way you've got it set up during the monitor setup, and they call this thing the monitor. Way off on the left-hand side of these and the right-hand side of these is a battery indicator. It's a low battery indicator for each of the stations. The base unit one will apply to its own batteries, and then if you get a low battery at any of the transmitters, it'll indicate that. And there's a little thermometer symbol that indicates that a temperature reading is being received from that respective transmitter or the sensor in the base unit. Right now I haven't got these configured, so they're not reading anything. This one I think I accidentally did while fumbling around for it, and it's getting a reading now. It's just saying ID. I think that means the first transmitter default name, but it is getting some sort of a reading from it. Then of course you have the temperature readout. You've got a humidity icon, which would read that you're getting a humidity reading from that transmitter, and this is the only remote one that's doing it, plus I'm getting a humidity reading from the base unit, and it's currently 40% humidity and 64 degrees Fahrenheit at the base unit. And it should be pretty close because all the remote transmitters are right next to where I am. They should be about the same reading. There's apparently a calibration you can do if you find that they're off by too much. Again, you've got the clock here and the date. There's an indicator that would appear here which is currently off, and that's for auto dimming, and I think you can make it go to a dimmer display during nighttime if the brightness of this unit would be distracting wherever it is. Along the base of these guys is an optional water detector, which is a separately sold item. It looks like a little faucet dripping. I'm not sure how that works, but apparently you can buy a separate item that indicates the presence of water. I don't know if that means it's raining on it or what it is. I'll have to read up on that. It's also possible to hook up a wired sensor, which is sold separately, to be used for any of these zones, and if you have that done, then it's going to display an indication along the bottom here. Something I didn't point out before with each of the wireless transmitters is there's a small slide switch inside the battery compartment where you can select A, B, and C that identifies which of the transmitters each transmitter is relative to the base unit. It identifies them as A, B, and C when you're doing the setup. So this one's A, this one's B, and this one's C. They were all set to A at the factory, so this is an important thing to set yourself when first installing these. So I've added the letters A, B, and C in Sharpie pen to the back of each transmitter, also to help keep them straight during setup. For the purposes of doing the setup, I wanted to move these transmitters away from resting on the heavy metal surface of the table saw where I'm doing everything else, and also to get them at roughly the same height above the floor as the base unit, because obviously there's different temperatures at different levels from floor to ceiling in a room, and I wanted them to be as close as possible to the same temperature. So the first thing to set up is the time and the date, and I use the set button for that. This enters setup mode. All the displays clear and it says Eastern Standard Time, and I can adjust that to Central Standard Time. Then I push the set. It's pretty quick to respond, so you have to push set again. It's auto daylight savings time, so I've got that turned on. And now it wants to know the hour, so it's currently 3 in the afternoon. And I push it again. Now I'm doing the minutes. It's 39 minutes. Pretty much 40 minutes now, 3:40 p.m. I push it again and I get my month. It's 6 set up to 1. If I push the down button, it goes to 12, so at least it rolls over. That's good. Oops, I rolled past it. So I'm doing this again, scrolling through it. And it's the 22nd of December. So I'm going to roll backwards to 22nd, and it's 2017. So I've got that set up. And now it wants to know whether I want Fahrenheit or Celsius, and I select Fahrenheit. And barometric scale, it's defaulting to inches of mercury, or INHG. I'm going to leave it there for the moment, and after I don't touch it for a moment, it comes back to regular display. As pointed out before, the display unit or the base unit or the monitor, whatever you want to call it, features built-in sensors for monitoring temperature and humidity at its location. The display can also be expanded to track additional conditions by using compatible monitors and sensors, which are sold separately, as mentioned before. You can add up to 3 indoor and/or outdoor monitors and sensors. There are some compatible monitors, such as a temperature and humidity monitor for outdoor locations, a room monitor for indoor applications, a temperature and humidity sensor just like the other ones that come with it. This unit does not appear to tolerate more than 3 remote units, so I'm not sure how it handles that. And then there's a temperature and humidity sensor, which also has a built-in display. And then there are some wired sensors for detecting water. This is for basement flooding, roof leaks, leaky appliances, sump pump failure, tracking high and low water level. There's a liquid and soil temperature sensor for things like indoor pool, spa, pond, or fountain temperature, preventing frozen pipes, and for seeding, potting, and gardening applications. And there's a spot check temperature and humidity sensor for monitoring conditions in hard-to-reach places such as the attic, basement, areas where the pets are, evaluating heating and cooling efficiency and coverage in your home, monitoring conditions in a nursery or child's room. There seem to be 2 different models mentioned on the manual, and it's not clear if it's referring to both models or not. It doesn't make any differentiation in the manual that I can see so far as to which model it's talking about. Maybe they have similar capabilities, but I'm definitely working with the model 06036 here. So to set up a location name on the display, to start out doing that, I push one of the color buttons at the corners for the zone that I'm interested in setting. So I'm going to start with this upper left-hand one. I want that to be my indoor garage temperature. So I push that one, and it puts an arrowhead here on the display. And now I push the gear button here, and it comes up with records. And now I push the up and down buttons to cycle through, and I said this was going to be the indoor garage. So I'm going to cycle through till it says edit name, and then I push set, and it starts out with the default of IDA, and IDA is the garage indoor thermometer. Well, I didn't do it quick enough, so now I lost it. I have to start again. Push that, push settings, push set, edit name, set, and cycle through till it says garage. It seems to be in alphabetical order. And once it's set there, then I push the set button again, and it says garage up here. I want this one to be the garage outdoor, which I've designated as sensor B. So I push this one up, and it says add. I wait till it says add, and it says style, select, Actually, I have to do the syncing process first, as it turns out, to add the other ones. I'd added this first one by default, just messing around. This one here is going to be B, so I have to sync the new sensor. Press and release the color-coded button next to the location with the name available, and it'll say Add Monitor, and it does say Add Monitor. Press the Set button and select a style, and I push the up and down button until the picture of the remote sensor is selected, and it says Monitor ID, and I can push the up and down button to cycle through A, B, and C. It already knows A is in use, so it only gives me the B and C options. I know this is B, so I select that. It says Finding. And it says B found. And now I can select different names. So I'm going to go down here to, this was going to be the one on the outside of the garage, so it's going to be the word outdoor. Outdoor, I push set again, and now I've got one that says garage and outdoor. Now I have to program this one. This is going to be my basement one, so I'm going to go through the same steps. I push the color-coded button by the zone. I select the style as an outdoor type sensor, and it already comes up with monitor C. It's the only choice it gives me because A and B are already selected, so there's nothing to do there. It gives me the choice to switch ID, but I don't want to do that, so I just push select. It says Finding. And it says C found. And now it wants me to put in the ID. So I go through here, and this is going to be basement. And I push set. And now I've got all of these: garage, outdoor, basement, and display. And I might want to change that so it doesn't say display. To me that doesn't mean much. I want to change that to read indoor. So I'm going to push the color code button by this one and push the settings button and select up until it says edit name, push set, and now I'm going to go through here until it says indoor. You can't push this button too fast or it'll ignore you. There, it says indoor. I push select. So now I've got these sensors. It's reading 64 degrees on all three remote sensors and 65 on this one. It may be in fact a degree different between over here and several feet away. There's different lighting and so on. And I'm standing closer to this one, so my body heat might be radiating out and making it ever so slightly different enough to flip it up to 1 degree higher. So I'm not going to worry about calibration on these right now. They seem to be tracking pretty close. The humidity is comparable. They're reading 40 on these, 41 and 42. I'm not going to worry about that. They might be just on the hairy edge of reading one number or the other. It's close enough for the moment. If I decide later that they're way off, I think you can calibrate that. So each one's reading its respective location as programmed. Each is getting good signal strength, except for this one, which is using the local sensor. Each of them is getting a valid temperature and humidity data input from its respective sensors. Each one's programmed to I'm getting my time of 3:54 p.m. on 12/22/17, so that's all looking good. There's another feature I forgot to mention earlier. There's a small button that almost misses observation here. It's pretty easy to not even notice that it's a button, but if you're in battery operation mode, if the AC powers failed, for example, and you're just running on battery power, the display is going to go to a low backlight power to conserve battery, but by pushing this button momentarily you can cause the backlighting to come on. But if you're running off the AC adapter normally, then you can select different levels of backlighting. This is full bright. That's a dimmer one, dimmer yet, and full bright. Now my camera automatically adjusts for brightness, so it doesn't look very dramatic on the video, but in reality there's quite a lot of difference between these three settings. This doesn't look as glary as it looks here, it's just the camera messing with you. In fact, they're all very good settings and they look very clear. That reset button that's hidden behind the battery compartment cover returns the unit to all factory defaults, and the clear button that's on the back is for resetting the high and low records that are stored. Alright, so now all these sensors need to be mounted somehow, and they can be hung from a cord or a hook using this loop at the top, or you can use a screw or a nail into the small slot in the back. And they don't say anywhere that I could see, but it requires a number 4 screw. Any bigger than that and it won't go in there easily. So I've got a set of small sheet metal screws here, which can be used into wood or metal or siding. If you're going to use it with drywall, you need to have one of these plastic adapters that goes into a drilled hole in the drywall, and then the screw goes in and expands it and holds it into the drywall. Since these aren't supposed to be in direct sunlight if they're outdoors, it'll give you a false reading because the unit gets warmed by the solar radiation and it will read higher than the true air temperature. So it's important to keep it out of direct sun, and to make these last as long as possible, it's best if they're not baked by the sun anyway, and to keep them out of direct rain is a good idea. I only am going to have one of these that's actually outdoors. And I got the bright idea that I was going to buy a small cheap birdhouse at the hardware store. They carry these things at craft centers and everywhere else. This would have its built-in roof, and sides should keep the sun off. The only thing I don't want to do is have birds making a nest in this, so I have to remove the door. Otherwise, certainly some bird's going to try to live in here. And I've got a couple of deck screws to screw this to the wall of the garage. It even came with a couple of screws, which I didn't realize, and they look like they're almost identical to what I bought, so that's a good thing. I just have to remove this cover and I should be ready to install before it gets dark outside. Okay, so the cover of the birdhouse is off, and this actually looks a lot like the little environmental covers that professional meteorological equipment is put under when it's out in the field. They often have a box very much like this, often made out of wood, and then maybe just a kind of a screen or a lattice work in the front to discourage larger critters from going in there, but still allow air motion and so on. Anyway, so that's kind of similar, and I feel like I've got a reasonably legitimate way of doing it. So I've got one of the sheet metal screws in there, and I can find the hole for it. It slots down over that and it will not fall out. Should be reasonably secure in there. Now I've got this location next to my detached garage, which is in between the neighbor's fence and the side of the garage. I want to keep it out of the direct rays of the sun, which will usually only be a problem later in the day as the setting sun, that's west that way. So I'm going to put it down fairly low. It'll be blocked by the fence most of the time, but it's most decidedly outdoors and just high enough above the ground that any curious critter probably isn't going to get into it. So it's going to go right here on the corner of the garage. Alright, so there it is mounted on the side of the garage. Pretty much out of the way. There's no traffic there. Should do a pretty good job. It's not going to get directly rained on, and it should never be exposed to the direct rays of the sun being in there. Here's my other Acu-Rite product, which is they're just plain old-fashioned analog low-tech meter, which is not expected to be all that accurate, although I have a Thermometer digital thermometer that's saying 38 degrees Fahrenheit in here. And it's not too far off. It's reading probably closer to 39 degrees. I don't expect this to be any more than 2 degrees close to the real temperature anyway. It's resolution of the display is not that good. The pointer width and everything, it's hard to get it in there, but I've done an Amazon review on this product, but not a YouTube video. There's really not that much to say. But anyway, I've got my drywall anchor in there and the sheet metal screw. And there it is. So now that I've installed those 2 transmitters outside, I'm still getting really good signal strength, although I'm not that far from where they are, probably 50 feet from the outdoor one and 60 feet or a little bit more from the other one. When I remove this to the other end of the house where this base unit's really going to go, it's going to add another 40-50 feet to the distance. But with the signal strength as good as it is, still full bars, hopefully it'll be plenty. I believe these are rated to go up to 300 feet. Up to is always a questionable specification. Realistically, what do they do? Kind of hard to tell, but probably good enough to reach within the boundaries of most people's properties. And here in my basement, right above my tool bench, I have the old transmitter. It's actually a Radio Shack one. That was the first multi-zone one I had. It stopped working as a transmitter years ago, but it still has a usable display, so I just use that for its own purposes, but it's not transmitting back to anything. I've got my screw in the Masonite here, and one thing that's important to point out when you're doing these screws with this type of hook, it's always a good idea to tweak it so it's just the right distance from the wall or other backboard. You want these to go on firmly so they don't just swing around loosely and fall off when something goes bump. So I adjust it until it just barely goes on there, and you have to push it on with a little force. That's about as firm as it's going to go. And I haven't busted my basement unit so far. I did drop it on the floor once, but it still seems to be reading, and it's got a good battery. And so I've got 2 more anchors here between my door frame and a window frame. And this is quite an old house, and things aren't done the way you do it anymore. This is more like a farmhouse construction. So pardon the crudity of the woodwork. I didn't do that, it's the way it came. And a former significant other decided to paint all the trim salmon colored, and I could care less, so it's still that color, so pardon the choice of colors. But also right above this is where I just took off the old base unit from my old multi-zone unit. It was only secured by 2 screws, but it flopped around all the time, and I'd put in a little bit of double-sided sticky tape there to hold it. When I peeled it off, it took off the outer paper of the drywall, which is a bummer. I'm going to have to patch that, but right now I'm not going to delay. And so here's the unit in operation between my door frame and my window frame. I can see my outdoor temperature is currently reading 40 degrees. I think that's probably a little high, but it's only recently been moved into this location. It may still be adjusting. I usually find that these thermometers are reading rather slowly, or slow to update. They seem to have a lot of dampening in their circuitry. I've got a good signal strength on my outdoor one, which is probably a good 80 to 90 feet away from the base unit. At this point I've got a full bar signal strength. Same signal strength as in the basement, which is only about 20 feet away from here, transmitter wise. And the garage is a bit closer than the outdoor one, but reading the same signal strength. And of course the indoor one doesn't have a signal strength. And this is the display with all the lights turned off. A few words about the weather forecast part of the unit. According to the manual, it's a self-calibrating forecasting algorithm that gives you a personal forecast of weather conditions for the next 12 to 24 hours by collecting data from a sensor in your backyard. It generates a forecast with pinpoint accuracy, I sort of doubt that, personalized to your exact location. But then it has a note, a big caveat: to forecast precipitation accurately, a weather-resistant monitor or sensor sold separately must be placed outdoors, and its location name must be set to outdoor or garden. Now that's precipitation. I don't know, presumably it'll give me everything else, but it won't tell me the precipitation. I don't know how useful that makes it unless you get that thing. And it's not clear whether that replaces your other sensor. For example, the one I hung on my garage, that's my only outdoor one. So I kind of suspect you have to give that one up to get the accurate precipitation readout on this. It has a learning mode. It has a barometric pressure readout, which at least is useful. And it'll give you high and low records. To view the high and low record information for a location, you press and release the color code button next to each location. For example, this one. And you get the arrow there. And then you push the that button, and it says records up there. And then you push the set button, and it says today the highest temperature it read was 42 degrees at that location, and the lowest was 39. The display automatically scrolls through the high and low records for today and all time. Today's records automatically clear at 12 a.m. midnight every day. All time records are the highest and lowest recorded since the unit was powered on, and there's a timestamp shown in the clock area to show when the record values were recorded. Well, it hasn't been running long enough to have any records outside of today, so I get a periodic flicker there, but I presume then if I had this for running for longer, it would change the time and the date and show me when the highest and lowest records were recorded. And notice I was getting below the display there. That's why it was reading kind of unclearly. Looking at it this way, it's better. So I don't really have that much interest in that. And you can manually clear the recorded data by opening up the battery compartment cover and pushing the clear button on the back. And after a while it reverts to its normal display, and you can tell that because all the other zones have lit back up. You can also set up alarms. This display features programmable alarms that can sound an alert to notify you when a value, for example temperature, humidity, etc., has been reached or exceeded. When the alarm is triggered, the display emits an audible beep and flashes data in the affected category. You can customize the alarms and do all sorts of things, but I'm not going to worry about that. It's in the manual if you need to do that. Here are the specifications. The display's built-in temperature sensor range is 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 122 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius. Obviously this is intended for indoor use, therefore it doesn't go colder than freezing. The humidity sensor for the built-in unit is 1% to 99% relative humidity. It's supposed to have a 330-foot maximum, presumably, range, depending on home construction materials. It operates at 433 megahertz, and it says nothing about what the specifications of the outdoor unit are. For that, presumably we have to go to the separate manual that's included with each of the remote transmitters. Here it has specification. It goes from minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 158 degrees Fahrenheit, from minus 40 degrees Celsius to plus 70 degrees Celsius, from 1% to 99% relative humidity, and it says the same 330 foot or 100 meter range that the manual for the base unit said. And they do have the customer support numbers all over the documentation. I did do a pre-sales call on this unit and I found I could get through pretty quickly. Acu-Rite's located in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and it seems like you don't get a foreign call center. When you call them, you get somebody in Lake Geneva, presumably. So there's that going in its favor.